Hello, welcome to Dental XP. I'm Dr. Maurice Salama. I'm glad to have you with us today. What we're going to talk about today is we're going to interview two experts in the field of implant dentistry, and we're going to talk about a common clinical problem. One of what to do with a hopeless or fractured tooth that needs to be removed in the mouth, and what to actually do with the extraction site. One of the issues is whether or not to place an implant at the time of extraction or whether to bone graft. And we have two experts in the field that are going to discuss that with me today. I look forward to it, and hopefully you will too. Dr. Jack Hahn from Cincinnati and Dr. Mike Pikos from Tampa, Florida. Looking forward to these discussions and hear what they have to say and how they manage the extraction site.
Right on the button. And there are several burrs now that are available to us. BioHorizons Pilot Burr is an excellent one. Nobel has an outstanding one. And I think even maybe a little better than both of those is BTI now, that has a very equivalent type spear type burr that is an initiating burr regardless of what implant system you're playing with. If you use one of those three to start your osteotomy, then the rest is pretty much going to take its own course.
Yeah, I prefer actually to go to the apex and then ride that burr up about 3 millimeters up the palatal wall and then engage that spear burr you're talking about.
Yeah, it's a cradle step.
Because without doing that ledge, sometimes even a long round burr if you want to create a ledge, but you need a ledge because invariably your twist drills are going to slip off and go.
Now to go even a step further,
you need an end cutting.
The Lindemann burr, which is a nice side cutting burr, will create that little groove just enough to do the same thing, and you'll create a ledge at the same time without it being an end cutting burr, and then you can come in with that sharper burr to engage your purchase point and then start your osteotomies that way. But that's so true. But as you mentioned, if in fact the facial plate's compromised, even a few millimeters into it just thinned out, then it puts us into a different ball game. And in those cases, what I have found over the years, and we've all experimented with a number of graft materials, from a DFDBA by itself to an alchemy of DBA with a bovine HA product or a bovine HA by itself. I've not had a lot of success with any of those combinations until I started to use a mineralized irradiated allograft, particulate cancellous bone, i.e. Pikos. And I found that product to be exceptionally predictable D2 bone at 4 months after grafting with it to the patient. I mean, case to case to case, such that it made me change my protocol for in years past where I would have a completely dehisced or almost totally compromised facial plate and say, let's put in something inexpensive, $30, $40 worth of DFDBA, knowing full well that we're going to come back in 2 months and I'll call it a filler, not even a graft, because for 2 months' time it's acting only to plump tissue out. And similar to the concepts that you had talked about and written in your article on the parallel wall heating abutments, which I've used ever since for some 8, 9 years now, in extraction implant placement in the aesthetic zone, this acted in the same capacity. The problem was, though, that subjected this patient to a block graft automatically, because that was my mindset. There's the paradigm, boom. Now it became a shift, because what happened is in placing Pikos out of frustration in some of these cases, I'm just going to pack a lot of Pikos in here, I'm going to close up and see what happens, and at 4 or 5 months out, remarkably enough to me, I was just amazed to see that a facial plate would actually reform, and not just a mineralized.
You took histology. I've seen your histology.
Yes, lamellar bone actually starting to see some absolute incredible reversal lines at 4 months. It's mind-boggling how fast the cancellous 1 to 2 millimeter particle size, the larger particle size, turning over such that the facial plate without a membrane is being reformed. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, do we even place a membrane or not? There's certainly controversy there. That's added expense. Dennis Tarnow has talked nicely about this ice cream cone biomend, placing it within the confines of the socket to protect the facial, and then the larger cone size coming over the crest itself. What I prefer to do is using off-angled tissue punches that are available to us in different diameters, typically for a central or a canine as an example, 8 millimeter are just fine. Deepithelialize the socket lining and
take a punch from the
palate And literally, once the graft is in, and it should not be condensed very much at all, this whole idea of pounding and tapping away is not a good one because it compresses the graft so much that it doesn't allow for good vascular ingrowth. So a moderate condensation only by hand, and I actually use a mirror handle, believe it or not, for that. And then the palatal plug over that is just ideal. If there's enough tissue dehiscence as well that we're looking at replacing, then I'll use a connective tissue graft either as a small finger flap pedicling up and even tunneling under the palatal aspect to the facial, or a free tissue connective tissue graft at the same time.
In the aesthetic zone, that seems to be very, very effective, where you're getting tissue, keratinized tissue, and you're making sure that you contain your bone graft material.
Yes, you're getting tissue bulk, keratinized tissue, as well as your particulate graft, and waiting a good 4 months on those, even 5, will give you predictable results that have just absolutely amazed me. So again, I've had to undergo a paradigm shift with my decision tree on how to handle these extraction sockets that are compromised.